This meeting is being live streamed and will be archived. Okay, somebody on there? The Rainbow District School Board would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Anishinaabeg, including Atikameksheng, Anishinaabeg, and Wampanoag nations. We would like to acknowledge that we are situated within the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and want to recognize the inherent rights of the Anishinaabeg that maintain these lands from time immemorial. I'll call on Director Bourget for a roll call, please.
Trustee Dabowski,
Present.
Trustee St. Jean, is marked present. Trustee Gibson,
Present.
Trustee Cosmerly,
Present.
Trustee Morrison,
Present.
Trustee Hunda,
Present.
Trustee Stringer,
Present.
Trustee Clement,
Present.
Trustee Dewar,
Present.
all present. Oh, Student Trustee Yao,
Present.
all present. Chair Clement.
Thank you, Director Bourget. We'll go right to A, approval of the agenda. We have a motion that the agenda for the regular board meeting of January 25th, 2022 be approved. I need a mover. Trustee Morrison. Seconder. Trustee Cosmerly. Poll vote, please, Director Bourget.
Trustee Clement,
In favor?
Trustee Dabowski,
In favor.
Trustee Dewar,
In favor.
Trustee Gibson,
In favor.
Trustee Hunda,
In favor.
Trustee Cosmerly,
In favor.
Trustee Morrison,
In favor.
Trustee St. Jean, is in favor. Trustee Stringer,
In favor.
and Student Trustee Yao.
In favor.
All in favor, Chair Clement.
Thank you, Trustee Bourget. If I miss anybody, I think maybe it is the cold weather. My screen is going on and off. The pictures, your videos are going on and off like a popping puzzle. So if I miss you, sorry. B, preliminary declaration of pecuniary interests. Being none. Go to presentations, please. Call on Director Bourget.
Thank you. So, trustees, I am pleased to provide you a brief presentation on enrollment. It will come up on your screen momentarily. So it has been a tradition that we provide the enrollment numbers every fall, typically in November. This year, our presentation for enrollment comes to you later in the year as we work through some reporting challenges in our new student information system we are implementing. You will recall that the ministry requires us to submit actual enrollment figures based on two count dates, October 31st and March 31st. These numbers generate the grants for student needs, which we call the GSNs, that our board receives. Approximately 50% of the grants for student needs is generated by the October 31st report, and the second 50% is generated by the March 31st report. Please note that any enrollment recorded after October 31st is not counted until March 31st. Hence, if a student were to enroll on November 1st, this does not count for the GSNs for October, and no revenue is generated until the next reporting date in March. Enrollment in this current school year is derived at by combining in-person learners and remote learners. And to that end, let me be clear that students recorded as homeschooled are not calculated as part of our enrollment stats submitted to the ministry for grants for student needs calculations. Homeschooled students do not receive public school support. So if we look at our enrollment by panel, you'll see that we have a total of 8,755 in-person elementary students, and this is as of October 31st, 372 remote, and a total of 9,127 elementary students. In the secondary panel, we had 4,009 in-person learners, 156.5 remote students, for a total of 4,565.5 secondary students. And remember that students can be part-time in secondary schools, so you see the 0.5 there. Our totals as a system, 528.5 remote students, 13,164 in-person students, and a grand total of 13,692.5 students as of October 31st. We are currently working on survey results for in-person and remote learning for February 7th. So the numbers shown here for remote learning change for the second half of the year and will change for the March 31st reporting date. But trustees, I share good news with you today because we have an increase in enrollment this year. And as you can see from some of the data in our next slide, the number of remote learners for the fall was 4.1% for elementary students and 3.4% for secondary students. And this was a very significant change from the previous year, where both panels combined last year to 20.7% students in remote learning for the start of the school year last year. And then it dropped for the second survey. Now I will share with you our current survey for February 7th. It's just being finalized, but preliminary numbers I will share with you because I think it's a question that would probably come out of interest as anyway. But if you look at the chart, a couple quick differences. Our remote numbers have climbed in secondary to 320 for February 7th, which would reflect a gain to 7% from the 3.4, and 506 students in elementary from 372, which makes up 6.4%. So those are some changes coming to future reports, but what you see on screen is October 31st information. If we look at our elementary enrollment, this slide shares positive news in that we predicted 8,742 elementary students for this school year. And it's great for us to see that as of October 31st, we had 9,127, which reflects an increase of 385 students over what was predicted. There's no doubt a reflection of the tremendous work of our elementary administrators, our school teams, and the great work that all teachers and support staff do in our schools each and every day. If we go to our secondary enrollment, this slide also shares very positive news in that we predicted 4,575 secondary students for the school year, and we had 4,565 students as of October 31st. And when you think about our geographic area and the number of secondary schools, to be within 10 students of the prediction for this year is truly outstanding work by our administrators and all the hard work that's been done with Executive Council to have the most accurate predicted enrollment we possibly can. Some updates on homeschooling. Over time, we would normally say that homeschooling stats do not vary very much from year to year. However, once again, this is not a normal year. There's been a noticeable increase for the past 2 school years in homeschooling. No doubt this is tied to the pandemic. As noted earlier, homeschooled students do not generate funds for the board. They are also not included in enrollment calculations used to generate grants for student needs. If you look at the last column, you may ask, and I'll note for you, the last column titled Not Compulsory Age indicates 19 students have not yet reached the age where they must attend school. And you'll remember compulsory age definition is attained 6 years of age after the first day of school in September. And while they were included in this report, parents do not have to enroll them at this time. Some of these students are always welcome back in our school. And when we do our survey, just to note, homeschooled students are surveyed to see if they'd like to transition to in-person or remote learning. So overall, I'll just give you a brief summary. Our board's enrollment has shown growth this year. I shared with you the differences between predicted enrollment and actual enrollment for October, both very positive news. But you may ask, how does that compare to our actual numbers from last year to our actual numbers for this year? And I can tell you that last year on October 31st, our elementary enrollment was 8,795. This year it is 9,127. So we've increased our actual total number of elementary students by 332 from last year to this year. In secondary, last year, our actual number of students were 4,473. This year, as you saw from previous slide, increased to 4,565. So once again, we've increased our actual total number of secondary students by 92 from last year to this year. We appreciate your patience, as this report would have typically been done much earlier in the school year. We thank you for that. I'd like to also thank our hardworking information services staff for all of the transition work they've done to go from our previous information system to Aspen, and our school offices who have worked tirelessly to go through this transition and help us get all of the numbers right. So we're pleased to present this to you tonight. It's great news. Sometimes good news comes to those who wait. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Director Bourget. That is a remarkable numbers, and the staff, thank you to the staff. They do a remarkable job. Are there any questions for Director Bourget? Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Clement. Through you, Chair Clement, to Director Bourget. Those high school figures, I believe you said it was an increase of 95 students year over year. How does that compare to the amount of students that we knew were in the grade 8 cohort? What I'm trying to figure out is, did we get people that had chose to homeschool? Did they come back, or did we attract students from other boards, or did we just have a bigger cohort graduating grade 8? I'm just trying to get some context around that number, please.
Through you, Chair Clement, and thank you for your question, Trustee Gibson. If we refer back to the homeschool slide, I'll just, I won't put it back on screen, but I will share with you that we did see a tremendous increase last year in homeschooled students. It did dip somewhat this year. In secondary students, we had 55 this year. I will tell you that traditionally our grade 9 cohort is larger than the grade 8 cohort from the previous year, meaning that we have more grade 9s in our system each year than we had grade 8s the previous year. And I think that this trend is definitely continued this year. To go to an exact breakdown of whether it's a difference in homeschooling or just our traditional increase that we year on year seem to enjoy, would require a bit more of a breakdown, but I will tell you it's likely a combination of both. But we do have a larger group of grade 9s than we had a group of grade 8s last year. And we also have a larger group of junior kindergarten students this year than we had the previous year. Both are good news.
Thank you, Director Bourget. Any other questions?
Thank you. And I just had one other quick question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Regarding, you mentioned that through you, Chair Clement, to Director Bourget again. You mentioned that when we do the survey to go from in-person to remote, that we also survey the homeschool families. I'm assuming that's because they have to register to homeschool, and that's why we have their information. I was just wondering, is that the extent of the outreach, or are principals reaching out? Is there anything else that goes along with that, or we just sort of send them the survey? Thank you.
Through you, Chair Clement. Again, thank you for your question, Trustee Gibson. Our principals do connect with homeschooled families for a variety of reasons from time to time. So they do have some connections with us, and we do welcome back homeschooled students each and every year. Sometimes not until their high school years, other times certain family situations or plans change. So we are always in contact, and we do check in. However, for the purpose of the survey, what we did do is share all the surveys with all of our families by email, and there were some follow-up calls. I will tell you that we always appreciate our families who complete the survey, because it prevents the follow-up calls from our principals, but there were extensive calls made, and I can't thank our school offices and administrators enough, because Friday was a day of phone calls, and also a great deal of calls were made on Monday to try and have as much data as we could for planning our reorganization for February 7th.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you, Director Bourget. Oh, sorry. I got you. I got pressed the wrong button. Thank you, Director Bourget. Those are good numbers. And I see that you have here another presentation, strategic directions.
Thank you, Chair Clement. I would not say this is a presentation at this point. It's a brief update. But today I can provide this update on our progress with the renewal of our strategic directions. On Thursday, January 20th, the Strategic Directions Ad Hoc Committee, consisting of the trustees of the board, met for the third time. We reviewed our progress, and we worked through a draft of several components of the strategic plan. I'm very pleased to say that tremendous progress was made, and we are getting very close to completing a full draft to share. We will be holding another meeting very soon to continue all of this exciting work, and I will provide an update at our next strategic planning meeting on February 1st. I would like to thank all trustees for your tremendous support, your tremendous engagement, and your insights as we worked well together and collaborated with the feedback provided by our stakeholders to create our new path forward. And I look forward to our next meeting and providing future updates on February 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bourget. We'll go to D, report from in-camera committee of the whole board, the whole board meeting of the board. I'll call on Director to read the motion.
The motion states, from the report from in-camera, that motion 22-04 regarding labor relations matter be approved.
Thank you. I need a mover. Dina Morrison. Seconder, Trustee Stringer. Any questions? No questions. Poll vote, please.
Trustee Clement?
In favor.
Trustee Dabowski?
In favor.
Trustee Dewar?
In favor.
Trustee Gibson?
In favor.
Trustee Hunda?
In favor.
Trustee Cosmerly?
In favor.
Trustee Morrison?
In favor.
Trustee St. Jean? Trustee St. Jean is in favor. Trustee Stringer?
In favor.
And Student Trustee Yao.
In favor.
Vote is unanimous. Chair Clement?
Thank you, Director Bourget. EO business, previous minutes. A motion that the minutes of the organizational board meeting held on Tuesday, December the 7th, 2021 be approved. I need a mover for that. Trustee Cosmerly. Trustee Honda. Any questions? Sorry, any questions? I see none. Poll vote. Director Bourget,
Trustee Clement?
in favor?
Trustee Dabowski?
In favor.
Trustee Dewar?
In favor.
Trustee Gibson?
In favor.
Trustee Hunda?
In favor.
Trustee Cosmerly?
In favor.
Trustee Morrison?
In favor.
Trustee St. Jean? Trustee St. Jean is in favor. Trustee Stringer?
In favor.
Student Trustee Yao?
In favor.
The vote is unanimous. Chair Clement?
Thank you, Director Bourget. C, we have another motion that the minutes of the special board meeting held on Tuesday, January the 11th, 2022 be approved. I need a mover.
I think you skipped B. Sorry to interrupt you.
Maybe I put move by in both places. How about that? Okay. That sorry, we'll go back to B, that the minutes of the regular board meeting held Tuesday, December the 7th, 2021 be approved. And a mover for that. Trustee Morrison. Yeah. Seconder. Trustee Dewar. Any questions? I see none. Poll vote, Director.
Trustee Clement?
In favor?
Trustee Dabowski?
In favor.
Trustee Dewar?
In favor.
Trustee Gibson?
In favor.
Trustee Hunda?
In favor.
Trustee Cosmerly?
In favor.
Trustee Morrison?
In favor.
Trustee St. Jean? Trustee St. Jean is in favor. Trustee Stringer?
In favor.
And Student Trustee Yao?
In favor.
All in favor, Chair Clement?
Thank you, Director Bourget. Now we can go to C. That the minutes of the special board meeting held on Tuesday, January the 11th, 2022 be approved. Any mover? Trustee Cosmerly. Seconder, Trustee Gibson. Any questions? Poll vote, Director.
Trustee Clement?
In favor?
Trustee Dabowski?
In favor.
Trustee Dewar?
In favor.
Trustee Gibson?
In favor.
Trustee Hunda?
In favor.
Trustee Cosmerly?
In favor.
Trustee Morrison?
In favor.
Trustee St. Jean? Trustee St. Jean is in favor. Trustee Stringer?
In favor.
And Student Trustee Yao?
In favor.
All in favor, Chair Clement?
Thank you, Director Bourget. Now we'll go to number 2, tenders, requests for proposals. I see nil. Number 3, report and recommendations from board committees. I see nil. Number 4, 2021-2022 school year update. Director Bourget.
Thank you, Chair Clement. Trustees, we'll just get our presentation up for you, and then I'll begin. So trustees, I want to begin this evening's presentation by sincerely thanking our administrators for the work they're doing to keep our schools safe and keep our students healthy and our staff. I will tell you that the efforts of our principals and vice principals throughout this pandemic has been nothing short of heroic, and their work is greatly appreciated. We're all committed to protecting in-person learning because we know how important it is for the social, emotional, physical, and cognitive development of students. We remain focused on student mental health and well-being, as well as student success and achievement, with health and safety first and foremost. I'd also like to acknowledge our parents and guardians and their children, our students, for their patience and understanding. They've had to adapt to new realities, and they continue to demonstrate tremendous resiliency. It has been a privilege for us to educate their children, and we remain grateful for their support. I'd also like to thank all staff in Rainbow Schools. Regardless of the role they play, they too have been impacted by the pandemic and have had to do things differently. Our teachers and support staff are a prime example, shifting from in-person to remote with very little notice. Other staff have been asked to resume those additional duties that may be assigned from time to time, and they've rolled up their sleeves and have said, "We're happy to help." The staff in Rainbow Schools make us proud each and every day. And also I'd like to acknowledge your leadership as trustees. Right from the beginning and throughout this pandemic, our trustees have supported us and advocated for us. And by us, I mean administrators, staff, students, and families. You respect the challenges, you acknowledge the hard work, and through it all, you continue to ensure we don't lose sight of our core function. We are very fortunate to have dedicated trustees committed to our students' safety, well-being, success, and achievement. Thank you. To paint a picture of where we are and where we're going, it is helpful to look back at the weeks leading up to the winter break. So you see on the slide from Thursday, December 2nd to Wednesday, December 8th, we had 325 new cases, 25 active COVID-19 outbreaks, 11 of which were in schools from all 4 boards combined, and or on school buses. At the end of the day, on December 8th, there were 363 active cases in our area. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there was 4,212. And the vaccination rates, as you see on the slide. If we move forward, here's what the vaccination rates look like in graphic form on December 8th. I'll just let you look. With growing COVID-19 cases on December 8th, Public Health announced new legally enforceable measures to reduce the spread of COVID-19. These measures included limiting the size of social gatherings in certain settings, proof of vaccination requirements in non-essential businesses, and increased requirements for team sports. Public Health indicated that it is also doubling down on the basics like masking, physical distancing, and vaccination, and those requirements which will be strengthened in certain areas. New protective measures were implemented throughout the agency's service area, and those that were enforced in Greater Sudbury were expanded to reach across Sudbury and Manitoulin districts. And these changes did not have any impact on our schools because the measures were already implemented and remained in place. On December 8th, Public Health ordered Valley View Public School to close until further notice. All students from Valley View were transitioned to remote learning from home. And later in December, Valley View was cleared to reopen after the winter break. On December 8th, we shared a message with parents and guardians of in-person learners regarding voluntary rapid antigen testing over the holidays. Test kits were distributed on Friday, December 10th, 1 week before the start of the winter break. The goal at the time was to detect any potential cases of COVID-19 in asymptomatic students, regardless of vaccination status, before they returned to in-person learning when classes were to resume after the break. The testing was another measure to keep everyone safe, and we advise parents that their participation in rapid antigen testing or screening is voluntary. Students are not required to complete the testing in order to return to the classroom after the winter break, and they were not required to submit results. Note that the testing strategy at this point focused on the testing of students who had no symptoms of COVID-19. On December 10th, the Minister of Education joined with Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health to write a letter to parents and guardians about the rapid antigen tests over the winter break. We received this letter on the day that we distributed test kits in our schools, so it was certainly well timed. Here's a photo of the test kits that went home with in-person learners, and there are 5 test kits in each box. On December 15th, we sent a letter to parents and guardians indicating that we are looking ahead and planning for all scenarios following the winter break. Given that the situation with COVID-19 and the new variant of concern was very fluid, we wanted to ensure that we were prepared for any possible changes. We asked that students please bring home any personal belongings and learning materials so that they're ready for remote learning if needed. This would also ensure that students who are required to self-isolate following the break were prepared to participate in classes from home. We indicated that with enhanced public health measures, voluntary rapid antigen testing for students, vaccinations for students 5 to 11, and the availability of boosters for adults, we remained hopeful that case counts in our community would not increase. We did add that if case counts do increase over the holidays, the Ministry of Education and/or public health in districts could impose a delay to in-person learning, and we stressed that no decision had been made at the time. Our parents and guardians were advised that should a return to in-person learning be delayed, staff in schools will reach out to families on January 3rd and 4th to arrange for the safe distribution of technology. And students who do not have immediate access to technology would complete work on their own until they're able to connect. If remote learning is mandated for students at that time, we wanted them to be assured that we would make the transition as smooth as possible. We also reminded our families to use the rapid antigen test kits should they choose to do so, and save a test for the return to school scheduled for January 3rd. Quickly continuing with the data leading up to the break, from Thursday, December 9th to Wednesday, December 15th, another 230 cases were reported. There were 19 active outbreaks, 6 of them on school buses. There were 290 active cases in sub-read districts and service area. And since the pandemic, there was 4,442 local cases. The vaccination rate among 12 to 17-year-olds continued to increase. Dose 1 being at 84% and dose 2 just above 80%. And additionally, 32.5% of eligible children 5 to 11 had received their first dose. And here's a graph of the vaccination rates on December 15th. You'll note that the bar graph shows where the end result could be if there was 100% achievement. And you do notice that in the older age groups, certainly higher percentages. So here's what Dr. Penny Sutcliffe had to say about these stats when released. The Government of Ontario announced that starting on Monday, December 20th, individuals 18 and over are eligible to schedule their booster dose appointment. Public Health sub-region districts is deploying most staff resources to quickly ramp up local capacity. Protecting those who are most at risk will be the priority. It is also critically important to follow all public health measures in place, including enhanced measures in our area, in order to buy us more time to protect people with booster dose. It is anticipated that the ways in which public health follows up with cases and contacts will change in the near future, pending further provincial guidance. And we certainly know there's been a change, as we do everything possible to prepare for Omicron variant and a potential surge in cases. And for our English teachers out there, they may consider that last line a bit of foreshadowing, because the rules have changed, and I will talk about the impact of those changes in just a moment. Here's where the data stood at the beginning of the winter break. From Thursday, December 16th to Wednesday, December 22nd, 257 new cases. And public health had indicated with the rapidly evolving situation and given the epidemiology and laboratory findings across the province, that we could now presume that cases who screen positive for Omicron can be concluded to be that variant. So what they were saying is that the Omicron variant was taking over from the Delta variant. At that time, there was 15 active COVID-19 outbreaks, 7 on school buses in our 4 boards. On the 22nd, there were 300 active cases in our area, a total since the beginning of the pandemic of 4,697, with the vaccination rates continuing to increase for 12 to 17-year-olds, with dose 1 at 84.5%, and almost 40% of eligible children 5 to 11-year-olds having received dose 1. And if you look, our next chart shows the vaccination status as of December 22nd. And while the vaccination rate for the 12 to 17-year-olds was just over 80%, at that point, less than half of the 5 to 11-year-olds had received the first dose. I point that out because strategies are being implemented to bring those rates up. And I will talk about school-based vaccination clinics in a moment. As the winter break progressed, the case counts grew exponentially. From December 23rd to December 29th, 591 new cases were reported, 11 active outbreaks, 5 of them on school buses, and at the end of the day, there were 650 active cases in the Sudbury Health Public District Service area. The total had jumped to 5,287 since the beginning of the pandemic, with good news that the vaccination rate continuing to rise, with dose 1 for 12 to 17 at 84.6 and climbing to over 42 for the 5 to 11-year-olds. So there's slow but steady progress on the vaccination front. And here's a snapshot of the vaccinations at December 29th, with the 5 to 11-year-old vaccinations for dose 1 at 42.5%. Let's take a look at the numbers reported by Public Health. I'll just let you look at that slide. And you see the slight increase here, the vaccination rates of January 5th, showing a slight increase for the 5 to 11-year-olds. If we move on, we see our CBC slide. States Ontario pushes back to school reopening to January 5th and restricts PCR testing to high-risk individuals. So on December 30th, Ontario announced that back to school would be delayed by 2 days to Wednesday, January 5th. The province said at the time it will provide N95 masks for staff in schools and licensed childcare settings and deploy an additional 3,000 standalone HEPA filter units to the boards. Rainbow District School Board's share of the 3,000 standalone HEPA filters is 30 units. 3-ply masks would be provided for students, and only low-contact indoor sports and extracurricular activities would be permitted when schools resume in January. On December 30th, the Ontario government updated its guidance on case and contact self-isolation, testing eligibility, and instructions for cases to inform their close contacts of a possible COVID-19 exposure. This is the point where we began to see a significant paradigm shift in case and contact management. The province indicated that this simplified step-by-step guidance is available at ontario.ca/exposed. Specific requirements apply based on a person's age, their vaccination status, whether they live in the same household as the person who has symptoms or tested positive for COVID-19, and whether they are immunocompromised. On January 12th, Public Health, Sudbury Districts issued a notice to the community about what to do if exposed to the virus, develop symptoms, or test positive. You see from the slide, the rules are changing. On Monday, January 3rd, The Premier of Ontario announced that the province was moving to modified Step 2 of the roadmap to reopen. That's when we heard that students will be learning remotely until at least January 17th, delaying the return to in-person learning by 2 weeks instead of 2 days, announced by the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Ontario a few days earlier. Certainly, the pandemic has taught us that we need to be prepared for all scenarios. The modified version of Step 2 of the roadmap to reopen took effect on Wednesday, January 5th, for at least 21 days or until January 26th, subject to trends in public health and health system indicators. Here are the measures that affect schools and childcare. All publicly funded and private schools will move to remote learning starting January 5th until at least January 17th, subject to public health trends and operational considerations. School buildings are permitted to open for childcare operations, including emergency childcare, to provide in-person instruction for students with special education needs who cannot be accommodated remotely, and for staff who are unable to deliver quality instruction from home. During this period of remote learning, free emergency childcare will be provided for school-age children of health care and other eligible frontline workers. Shortly after the Premier's news conference, we issued a letter to our families indicating that in-person learners would move to remote learning until at least January 17th. Rainbow Schools would reach out to in-person learners to complete a survey to determine who requires technology to learn from home. Teachers would provide instructions to access the appropriate virtual platform, whether it's the Google Classroom or the virtual learning environment for secondary, to verify email addresses and to ensure that homeroom class timetables are posted on the platform. Instruction would begin on January 5th for all students. And students who had special education needs would continue to be supported remotely by their classroom teacher and an educational assistant. We also made mental health supports available. The large majority of our students with special needs can be accommodated remotely. It is not easy, and it can be a challenge for all students. There are a small number of students with significant needs that cannot be accommodated remotely, and those students attend Gene Hansen Public School and the Ruth McMillan Center. A total of 40 students were accommodated in person at Gene Hansen Public School and the Ruth McMillan Center during the remote learning period. And there were also 2 students at A.B. Ellis Public School. Students returned to school with enhanced health and safety protocols, and staff had access to N95 masks, and the students were required to provide confirmation of daily screening using the updated screening tool. The move from in-person learning to remote learning, as directed by the Province of Ontario, prompted Rainbow District School Board to review its final evaluation requirements for all secondary courses in Semester 1. We sent a letter to parents and guardians and students on January 6th to advise them of 2 very important changes. Final grades for all Semester 1 courses would now be based solely on assessment completed throughout the semester. There would be no final exams or culminating activities. There will be no final 30% evaluation for courses in Semester 1. Friday, January 28th, and the remaining exam days would be converted into instructional days. And these changes will maximize instructional time and enable students who may have been falling behind time to recover for course content. Teachers would also have more time to consolidate student learning, to support the completion of later missed assignments, and to assist students in earning their credits. These changes would also mitigate the potential for staff and student extended absences due to COVID-19 and the ensuing stress that may cause for teaching and learning. Student mental health and well-being remain a priority along with health and safety. Additional support will be provided to ensure student success. Our student success team has arranged for students from the Faculty of Education to be hired to help students catch up, close gaps, and rescue credits as a result of absences. And schools would focus on strategies to support students in earning their credits. N95 masks were part of the Chief Medical Health Officer of Health's announcement on December 30th. We received a shipment on Tuesday, January 4th, early in the morning, and the masks were delivered to all schools. The week of January 10th, we started to receive thousands of rapid antigen tests. As per Ministry of Education directive, we quickly pulled together a team to de-kit the boxes and put 2 rapid antigen tests per person in Ziploc bags with instructions on how to administer the tests. The tests were then delivered to schools for distribution to in-person learners the week of Monday, January 17th. Before classes resumed, we also received a shipment of 3-ply cloth masks for students. And as you know, we've been receiving shipments of masks and sending them to schools since the start of the school year. If we take a look at the numbers reported by Public Health, there were 987 new cases from January 6th to January 12th. 21 were active COVID-19 outbreaks in our community, and by the end of the day, we had 993 active cases in Public Health, Sudbury, and District Service Area. The total had jumped to 7,344 local cases, and vaccination rates continued to increase. If you look at the vaccination rates as of January 12th, they show a slight increase in the rates for 5 to 11-year-olds as well. On Monday, January 10th, we were beginning to see and hear through the media that in-person learning would resume on January 17th. The Minister of Education confirmed this information on Wednesday, January 12th during a news conference with Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health. On January 13th, we sent a detailed letter to families in preparation for the return of in-person learning. And I want to take some time to review the contents of that letter because there are some very significant changes. Like all sectors in the community, schools may experience staff shortages due to a high level of absences. And we will continue to do our very best to replace staff with supply teachers and casual support workers. Our staff and human resources are working diligently, including on weekends, to supplement staffing using all the strategies announced by the ministry. However, the pools are limited, and all school boards are experiencing the same challenges. This will have an impact on schools. Students in kindergarten to grade 8 require a higher level of supervision compared to students in grade 9 to 12. And we are quite upfront with our families, which I feel is a respectful thing to do. We indicated that in the event we do not have a teacher and or supervisor for an elementary class, we would notify parents and guardians early in the morning before the students take the bus, walk, or be driven to school. And we ask parents to check their email every morning to see if there's a message. If there's a need for a class to be canceled, parents would not be able to send their child to school. Parents and guardians would be called to pick up their children if they did attend. We had decided we're not going to mix cohorts from different classes due to staff absences to respect our previous protocols and maintain those cohorts as much as possible, both indoors and outdoors. We reminded parents and guardians to ensure they had a shared list of emergency contacts within the school. The Sudbury Student Services Consortium asked school boards to share this important message with parents and guardians as well. Families will not receive a call or email when there's a bus cancellation. Parents and guardians were asked to check the bus consortium's website each morning by 6:30 a.m. And here's the link. It's businfo.ca from the board website. We also shared information about the school screening tool, and it's been updated to include more symptoms of COVID-19 and new guidance on testing and isolation. Students and staff are required to screen rigorously on a daily basis before coming to school or work. And if you're sick, even with mild symptoms, if the screener tells you to stay home, we ask that you please do. This is essential to limit the spread of COVID-19. We ask that people follow the updated guidance on the screening tool and to be sure to scroll down to the bottom of the page and read all of the guidance. Because after people receive a screen color, there is more information to read below, whether it be green or red, which provides more information that's really important for everybody to be aware of. The Ministry of Education directed school boards and schools to perform daily confirmation of self-screening for students. Their parents and guardians of students from kindergarten to grade 6 are required to submit a form to confirm they've completed the screening tool for their children. Schools provide the link to parents and guardians via email before the start of the school day. And students in grades 7 to 12 confirm that they have completed the screening tool with their teachers in homeroom. The student's daily attendance serves as that confirmation. Daily confirmation of screening will remain in place until further notice. We also reminded parents to please ensure their child wears a mask to school, including the bus, and send any extras in case they get wet. Schools will have a supply of 3-ply masks that their children will be encouraged to wear. These are not mandatory, but they will be required to wear masks indoors and outdoors at all time. It's just the 3-ply masks are not mandatory, but a mask is. Kindergarten students will have the option of wearing face shields or visors if masks cannot be tolerated. We encourage families to watch videos on how to properly wear a mask for kids and for teens, and we also sent a link in a fact sheet we developed. As previously mentioned, rapid antigen tests were sent home with in-person learners prior to the winter break. Families were asked to save a test to use before returning to school. That was voluntary. Students are not required to complete the testing and return to classroom, but they're encouraged to do so. They were also not required to submit results. For those who did not have access to a test and wish to participate, it was recommended students conduct rapid antigen tests on Monday prior to coming back to school. And students who test positive on a rapid antigen test were required to self-isolate immediately. Students will no longer be required to confirm the result with a PCR test. This is a very significant change from past practice. The ministry has updated its guidance for schools and childcare settings on case, contact, and outbreak management. The guidance contains important information on COVID-19 testing and isolation requirements in response to the Omicron surge. We sent our families a link to the guidance. We encourage them to read it and the document and keep it as a handy reference. Given the widespread transmission of the Omicron variant and the changes to the provincial testing approach, Public Health will no longer be advising schools, school boards, of confirmed cases of COVID-19. They will also no longer be asking schools to dismiss cohorts or declare outbreaks. This is also a very significant change from past practice. It's part of the paradigm shift that we're all working through. As a result, schools will not have access to this information to share with parents and guardians, as we had been doing since the pandemic began. Public Health is no longer advising school boards of confirmed cases and no longer asking schools to dismiss cohorts or declare outbreaks. Schools are now reporting total absences for staff and students to the Ministry of Education each day. This data is published on ontario.ca. Absences on the provincial website reflect a percentage of students and staff who are away from school on the previous day, regardless of the reason. Any school absences that are 30% above the baseline, and the baseline being what is typically experienced in the fall, are reported to Public Health, sub-region districts for follow-up. And should there be any information to share related to COVID-19, Public Health will provide a letter to parents and guardians. In the event of a school closure, a notice would be posted on our advisory page as well. We have a link to the provincial data on our advisory page for ease of access. We also advise parents that the Ministry of Education sent us 2 rapid antigen tests for students and staff who are learning and teaching in person. These tests will be distributed and were distributed the first week back for elementary and some in the second week back for secondary. Students and staff are required to actively screen each day, regardless of access to testing, and to isolate if symptomatic, regardless of vaccination status and or test access. Bottom line, anyone with symptoms of COVID-19, according to the Ministry of Health, will now be deemed to have COVID-19. The 2 rapid antigen tests provided are to be used when people are symptomatic. Previous to this, it was for asymptomatic testing, and now it's changed after the winter break. As per the COVID-19 interim guidance for schools and childcare, Omicron surge, if 2 consecutive rapid antigen tests separated by 24 to 48 hours are both negative, the symptomatic individual is less likely to have COVID-19, and the individual should self-isolate until symptoms are improving for at least 24 hours or 48 hours if it's a gastrointestinal issue. We will continue to provide more information and education as we move forward, and will continue to distribute tests as required. We indicated to parents that public health may host vaccination clinics for students ages 5 to 11 during the school day. We advised families if a clinic is being hosted at their school. Please note, vaccination is voluntary. No student will be vaccinated at school-based clinics without signed parental consent. Parents and guardians will be invited to provide consent to have their child vaccinated should they choose to do so. Throughout the pandemic, we have learned that in-person learning is important for the vast majority of our students, not only from an academic and school perspective, but also for their well-being and social perspective. As indicated at the beginning of the school year, the next opportunity to transfer to in-person learning or remote learning will be on February 7th. Our parents and guardians were invited to complete their survey with the knowledge that whatever they choose will be in effect for the balance of the school year. The survey was available from January 18th to 20th, and staffing is being adjusted at this time to accommodate transfer requests. We indicated to parents they would receive a link to the survey, and I'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation. Schools will provide work for students who are required to self-isolate because they have tested positive, or if they're required to quarantine because they're a close contact of someone who had tested positive. This also applies to students who are required to stay home based on guidance in the provincial screening tool. Requests for short-term remote learning will be facilitated through the posting of assignments in the Google Classroom, which will be updated regularly. Support materials such as success criteria exemplars will be included where applicable. And parents can contact schools if technology is required. The Ministry of Education has developed online resources which are also on the board website. And in situations where technology is not available, paper copies would also be available on request where internet access is limited. In addition, we shared that all kindergarten classrooms have HEPA filtration units. You see a picture of one there. Ventilation devices have been added to our classrooms that do not have mechanical ventilation. Filters are being changed regularly on ventilation systems to ensure they're operating at maximum efficiency and capacity. And as previously mentioned, we had 30 additional units sent to us as part of the 3,000 issued by the province. And they are in secondary school cafeterias where students are eating and large spaces. Indoor high contact activities are being paused at this time. Sports like wrestling, which you see on the screen. Cohorting protocols will remain in effect for music classes. And with enhanced public health measures, voluntary rapid antigen testing for students, vaccinations for children aged 5 to 11, and the availability of boosters for adults, we indicated to parents that we remain hopeful and optimistic as we reopen schools for in-person learning. Health and safety, as always, will remain our first and foremost priority. We ask families to please continue to follow public health guidance. Most importantly, please stay home when you're sick. To protect in-person learning and keep our schools open, only students and staff who are feeling well should be coming to school. The night before schools were set to reopen for in-person learning, our local medical officer of health asked us to share a letter with their families. Who delivers the message is as important as the message, so we are certainly pleased to pass this letter along. This letter served to reinforce the information that we had provided a few days earlier. Thousands of rapid antigen tests packages have been distributed to students in Rainbow schools. Each package contains 2 rapid antigen tests. A letter was sent to parents and guardians on January 17th with detailed instructions how to use the rapid antigen tests and what to do if it's positive. And remember, the landscape has changed. Rapid antigen tests do not have to be confirmed by a PCR test. In fact, schools no longer qualify for PCR testing. This testing is reserved for high-risk settings like long-term care homes. And that's a decision of the Ministry of Health. Public health surveying districts hosted a clinic dedicated to educators, childcare providers, and education workers and their families on January 20th at the Garson Arena. We appreciate that support of public health. Everybody was welcome by walk-in or appointment. And parents and guardians were asked to complete a survey to confirm if their child is moving from online learning to in-person or vice versa. And as per my enrollment report, you know the survey was closed on January 20th. Our schools did have to follow up with many phone calls, and parents were asked to make a commitment from February until the end of the school year. It is a tremendous amount of work to do this reorganization, and it does cause changes in educational situations. So this will be the last reorganization before the end of the school year. But here are some statistics just to summarize. We currently have 320 secondary students who will now be learning remotely. This is up from 157. So it's in effect, it's doubled at secondary. And in elementary, we had 372 in October, and in February 7th, we have 506. So that's up by 134 students in the elementary panel. On January 19th, a letter from Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health and the Minister of Education was sent to all students, parents, and guardians. In the letter, Dr. Moore and Minister Lecce indicate how critical in-person learning is to the mental health, well-being, and academic success of students, and outline health and safety measures to protect in-person learning. As you know, the Minister of Education implemented a mandatory vaccination disclosure policy for school boards and licensed childcare settings for the 21-22 school year. As per the letter of instruction issued by the Chief Medical Officer of Health, school boards are required to report aggregated and depersonalized statistical information regarding COVID-19 vaccine booster doses for school board employees. All permanent and casual employees of the board were asked to submit a COVID-19 vaccine booster dose attestation by completing this form. We continue to submit data to the ministry so they can monitor trends. Again, these are aggregated and depersonalized statistics. As of January 21st, approximately 78% of employees who responded to the attestation survey have received their booster shot. And taking a look at the most recent numbers, quickly reported by Public Health. Public Health states from January 13th to the 19th, there were 934 new cases, 993 active cases in the service area, a total of 8,256 cases locally since the beginning of the pandemic, and the vaccination rates you see on the screen with dose 1 at 85% for 12 to 17-year-olds, and dose 1 almost approaching 50% now for 5 to 11-year-olds. If you look at the vaccination rates as of January 19th, you'll see that some of the gap between the potential number of vaccinated by age group and the actual, some gaps are closing. Quick message from Dr. Sutcliffe. With the COVID-19 Omicron variant's extraordinarily high transmissibility, the previous approach to testing is no longer feasible. So it is true that we have access to less information about cases. Public Health will continue to support education partners in the protective measures they have in place. Staff, students, and parents alike have championed the adoption of public health safety measures. Dr. Sutcliffe went on to say, keep it up. Parents and guardians are also encouraged to get their booster dose as soon as eligible. The Ministry of Education advised school boards that they may return to a 4-period day with the support of local health units. After consultation with public health suburban districts, we informed our families on January 24th that secondary students will resume their regular timetable in the second semester. There will be 4 periods a day effective Monday, February 7th in all of our secondary schools. And on behalf of our secondary school administrators, I'd like to thank our students and our families for their patience and support during the modified schedule. We will continue to follow public health and safety protocols to limit the spread of COVID-19. And while we're on the topic of secondary schools, I'd also like to provide an update on EQAO assessments for the current semester. Given the delay to in-person learning, Our secondary school students will not be writing the grade 9 math test at this time. And in conclusion, school-based vaccinations clinics are being offered in Rainbow schools over the next 3 weeks. They're in all boards. Certainly we have our share of clinics. The first clinic took place yesterday. Sites were selected in consultation with public health in order to meet the needs of communities and neighborhoods. Some of our schools are able to host clinics in gymnasiums that have a separate entrance from the school. Clinics at these sites will offer vaccines for staff, students, caregivers, and the public during the school day and into the evening. Parents and public will only have access to clinics from the exterior entrance of the gym door. No access to the rest of the school is granted. When there is not a dedicated separate entrance directly into the gymnasium, school clinics will not be open to public or caregivers. During the day, public clinics at these locations will be open after hours for members of our community. During instructional hours, on-site staff and children with consent forms from their parents will be the only ones receiving vaccines. These school-based clinics are part of the province's approach to increase vaccination rates among 5 to 11-year-olds by offering more opportunities to get vaccinated at close and convenient locations. These are the clinics that are taking place from February 3rd to February 10th, and they're on your screen. February 3rd at Adamsdale, February 9th at Princess Anne, February 9th at C.C. McLean, February 10th at Lansdowne, and February 10th at Eskager Public School. As mentioned, students being vaccinated at clinics during school hours require a signed consent form, and we have an example of the consent form up on the screen. To support a greater uptake of vaccination for 5 to 11-year-olds and to support the delivery of second doses as the 8-week interval will soon be reached for many children, the province is asking school boards and local public health PHUs to continue to work together to host voluntary school-based vaccination clinics that are targeted towards its population. On January 21st, the Ministry of Education asked that all schools send home consent forms for students aged 5 to 11, and that principals collect the consent forms in order to measure the community's interest in school day clinics. We followed up with Public Health yesterday to facilitate the distribution. We asked all elementary schools today to email a package from Public Health submarine districts to their families about vaccination clinics for 5 to 11-year-olds. The Ministry of Education has asked school boards and public health units to work together to share information about vaccination opportunities. And at this time, Public Health is attempting to determine interest, and based on response, will plan more school-based clinics. Parents and guardians who would like their children vaccinated during school hours must complete the signed consent form and return it to their child's school by Friday, January 28th. It is important to note that no students will be vaccinated at a school-based clinic without signed consent. Students can pick up a paper copy of the consent form in the main office at their school. Parents also will receive a copy online electronically. Parents are also asked to have that paper copy sent home if they need that. So of course, just a few pieces of our regular business. Kindergarten registration. Our schools hosted virtual information nights once again this year. Presentations can still be accessed on school websites, and it is certainly a benefit to the online format. Our website is rainbowschools.ca, and if you have a child starting school in the fall, now is the time to register. I can tell you that the effort made by our principals, our elementary principals, to provide really good information in an engaging way is truly exemplary. In terms of virtual secondary information nights, please visit school websites to determine access to online resources to help make informed decisions about secondary schools. Information nights continue throughout February. School staff are available to provide more information and can facilitate meetings online, and students can register anytime by contacting their area Rainbow Secondary School. And again, we thank our principals and our staff in both panels for their creativity with these online presentations once again this year. They've done an amazing job of welcoming families and prospective students into their schools through video messaging, tours, slide presentations, and virtual meetings. Since the start of the school year, we've been reminding our students to screen for COVID-19 as part of your morning routine. This is more important than ever. Our message is simple. If you're sick, stay home. If you're well, come to school. And when in doubt, wait it out. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Director Bourget. Are there any questions? Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Clement. Through you to Director Bourget, thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. I wanted to ask a question about absences and how they're recorded. So you mentioned that because there's that whole threshold and you were talking about the historical absences, and I'm just trying to understand, first of all, who is recorded as absent. So if you were an in-person student and you decided not to go to school, but you took the temporary online option where you were logging into Google Classroom and doing your assignments, are you recorded as at school or are you recorded as absent?
Through you, Chair Clement. Schools are recording absences based on students who are not engaging in school without reason. So it could be a wide variety of things. It could be a student who is not well and following our guidance where they have symptoms and they're staying home. It could be a student who is staying in quarantine because of a household contact situation. It could be a student who doesn't have busing for the day due to a cancellation or a wide variety of other reasons. So the additional, that 30% threshold can make up a wide variety of students. Certainly students who are making other arrangements prior to their transition on February 7th to remote. Schools are recording who is working through that process. And it's not a significant number that is adding to a 30% determination above a baseline, but schools are in contact with families regarding that and communicating with them and providing work.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then I had a second question, not a supplementary, a different topic. Regarding the change back to 4 classes a day for secondary students. So our survey closed on January 20th, and then that was announced on the 24th. And I believe we still don't have any extracurricular activities happening. Those are all still off. So I'm just wondering if you could share the rationale from public health between going to the 4 for the timing of the decision after everyone had completed their survey and the reason for doing it now. I appreciate you can only do it now or you can't do it in the middle of the semester. So, but what was the decision to decide to go ahead and do that?
Through you, Chair Clement, our survey did indicate to parents that that was a decision that was forthcoming and may happen. We didn't make the decision at that time because we were trying to gather as much information as we could. Certainly the trend throughout the north and the province is to go to back to a 4-period day. There is a balance of things to consider, but certainly the decision was not, public health made the decision a possibility for us, but we made the decision. We did take some extra time to make that decision. It's not to be timed with the survey, but to try and gather as much information as we could, to consult with other boards, to have more discussion time with public health, and also to kind of take stock of what's going on in our schools, have conversations with principals, and then we made the decision. So the timing would not be on public health, it would be on me. I will take responsibility for the timing of that. But I will tell you that we made every effort to try and gather as much information as we could. At the end of the day, it is widely being the decision of most boards to go to 4 periods. The reasons being primarily that the 150-minute period is very difficult for the majority of students. Certainly some of our at-risk learners would benefit from shorter bouts of each subject throughout the day. In addition, it is very difficult for our staff in secondary schools because on a bi-weekly basis, they basically are teaching for the entirety of the day, save for a lunch break. And then the next week, they have one period for the morning. So it's the inconsistency of the schedule. The breaks between the learning are difficult for some students. So if they go from the week 1 schedule and they're doing some concepts in math, then the next week we try to continue to give them some work to bridge the gap, but they're focusing on 2 other subjects, and then they come back to math 2 weeks later and try and pick up where they left off. So all in all, the modified semester was a good solution to the cohorting requirement, and we still maintain cohorts in those classes and still cohort at lunch. But overall, it's a difficult decision, but we also have to consider the academic achievement, the well-being of our students, the wear and tear of the double length periods, and we made a decision to go forward with a 4-period day. I can tell you, we've received tremendous amount of positive feedback from staff, school administrators, students, and families who are, for the majority, very positive about that change. I know that any decision will be met with different opinions, but I can tell you that the majority of our stakeholders feel good about this decision going forward.
Thank you very much to Director Bourget. I can certainly appreciate the complexities of the issue, so thank you for that explanation.
Thank you.
Okay, I see Judy Cosmley.
Thank you. Through you, Director Clement, to Director Bourget. I just want to commend you. I thought the pivoting and the challenges the board has faced over the last 2 years were rough. I don't know how you're managing day to day. All of you are facing incredible challenges to make sure that the students get the education that they need and that everybody is safe. So I just want to commend you, because this goes beyond what you would expect in your role or for the administrators. And I'm sure we all appreciate what you're having to deal with. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Cosmley.
Trustee Cosmley, and I saw Trustee Morrison.
Very briefly, thank you. I just want to ditto Trustee Cosmley's comments. Thank you very much for those comments, Judy. And they certainly reflect my own, and I hope they reflect everybody's opinion about the terrific work that everybody is doing. I'd just like to ask a follow-up question to Trustee Gibson's question. So through you, Chair Clement, to Director Bourget. Bruce, do we think that if the announcement had been made earlier about going back to 404, that we would have had more students choose in person? Because I would agree with you. I think this is a decision to go back to 4 periods is very warmly received. And I've received nothing but positive feedback. Not that I get a lot of feedback anymore because I'm not in contact with a lot of people. But for those that I have spoken to, this is a move that was very welcomed, and people were looking forward to it. So I think behind Trustee Gibson, and I don't want to assume anything, Trustee Gibson, but the question to me then is, do we think others that have now signed up for remote would have signed up for in-person had they known they were going to 404?
Through you, Chair Clement.
Thank you, Trustee Morrison.
I would share 2 pieces in response to both Trustee Cosmley's comments and Trustee Morrison's comments, that I'm happy to accept the very positive feedback on behalf of all of our staff. I'm just one part of a big team, and we have huge dedication in all of our workforce. Every part of the Rainbow District School Board is working as hard as they can to get through this stretch, so thank you. In terms of the decision, again, we would love to have had every piece of information that we wanted to at our fingertips prior to any types of points of decision for our survey. The best we could do in our survey was to allude to the fact that it is something that will be coming at a given point, and the decision was made to do that to start the semester rather than to wait. But in our survey, it was made known that a 4-period day would be coming as the Omicron wave subsides. and the decision was made to go with February 7th based on the best information we had. Of course, there'll be a variety of different opinions, but should someone have made that their key piece to making their decision between in-person and online learning, I would say that we did try to mitigate any decisions by saying that it's something being considered and something on the horizon. Unfortunately, that's the best we could do at that point, but I do think that most people who made up their decisions have been thinking about it for quite some time, and hopefully are still feeling good about the choice they made. Right now, we're just going to focus our efforts on all the reorganization that's required to facilitate those choices that have been made before February 7th. But again, thank you for your kind words. I can tell you that all staff should be commended across the board for their tremendous efforts, and I accept only on their behalf, as I'm only one small part of a very, very large and dedicated team.
Thank you, Director Bourget. I saw Linda, the trustee DeBoski, please.
Thanks, Trustee Clement. My question is in relation to the absences, the 30% threshold, and the follow up with public health in relation to those. I understand that the province is reporting the staff and student absences per school on the Ontario portal. In relation to Rainbow District Rainbow District school boards, we have three schools that are above the 30% threshold that have been reported to the Ontario website. And in the letter from Rainbow District School Board, it states that going forward, school boards will be required to report absences due to illness as mandated by the province. If absences rise to a defined level, approximately 30% in schools, we will notify public health Sudbury District and follow their guidance. So I'm just wondering if we've done so with those three schools, being Central Manitoulin Public School, Lansdowne, and Marks Day, who are above the 30% threshold, and what has been the guidance from public health on those. And going forward, if we're being accountable to the province through their provincial website reporting these absences, will we share that in the spirit of transparency on our board website, if it's the same information being shared with the province and they're putting on their portal? Thanks.
Through you, Chair Clement, thank you for your question, Trustee DeBoski. So there's several parts to my answer. One part I'll go in maybe reverse order, if that works. But in terms of sharing information, everything that we are required to report, we certainly are sharing with the province, and we're uploading. There's a one-day lag, as you know, so what comes out today would be yesterday's data, and that's something that's just the way the provincial reporting tool works. It's not same-day data. I believe that we've posted a link. We don't want to replicate the report, but we've posted a link to our website so people can easily access that, and I will make sure that that is live and working well, so that people who are looking for that data can, if they're looking at our COVID advisory section on our site, will be able to find a quick link to the province report, because we don't want to duplicate the information. We just want to provide ease of access. So the provincial website link is posted and live now. That's my knowledge that I have, so I hope that we can double check that, but it should be live for transparency. In terms of the communication, we have a system in place with our schools, and the 30%, I just want to make sure everybody's aware, because there's so much new information. It is 30% above the baseline, so it's not 30% as a whole, it's 30% above the baseline. The baseline, I want to thank our Information Services Department. They've worked really hard to gather statistics from the first day of school in September until December 17th, and that is the information we are currently using as a baseline. The baseline may change depending on input from the Ministry or Public Health, because we know that as the school screener tool has changed, some of these reporting pieces may change as well, but we'll continue to adapt and adjust. but what we've shared with our administrators is that if they are reporting 30% above the baseline, they are to notify our COVID lead and our superintendent, who's involved with health and safety, so Nicole Charette and Leslie Fisher, superintendent, who will then work with public health and take any next steps, and also know our health and safety officer, David Digby, is also highly involved as well. What we're told is that there could be visits from public health to do infection prevention and control meetings, just to make sure that all protocols are in place. And anytime there's been an outbreak in schools in the past, we've had what's called an infection prevention and control meeting, nicknamed IPAC meetings. And the IPAC meetings have taken place throughout the pandemic, where we work cooperatively with staff who come into our schools and take a look at how protocols are being adhered to, PPE use, and all of the other measures that are supposed to be in place, and provide any suggestions. And I can tell you that we're very proud to say that through the hard work of our staff and our administrators, all of the previous IPAC meetings have gone very well, and we expect if there is any necessary in the future to go well as they have in the past. So we're working hard to follow all protocols. We will continue to be transparent, and we will continue to accept any suggestions, advice, or direction from public health or the ministry. And the link is there for transparency purposes. So I hope I've answered all parts of your question. I apologize if I missed anything.
Thank you, Director Bourget. Any more questions? Trustee Stringer.
Through you, Chair Clement, to Director Bourget. So just to clarify, the baseline data that was established, I understand this was established by the province, that there would be a baseline set, and that was set for each board. Is that correct?
We've worked with the definition we have, and we've established a baseline for our school. There's a different baseline. There's the attendance rates in elementary are slightly different than secondary from September to December. So when an elementary school goes above our elementary baseline, we work to report it. We did, in the case of some schools, as Trustee Dabowski said, work through public health, and then public health contacts us back to see if there's any follow-up or to have any discussions. But certainly, I hope I didn't miss any parts of any questions, but I think that's what you're looking for, or is there more?
Supplemental, Chair Clement. So yes, that is what I was looking for, but just what is that elementary baseline number? We were talking about this in our mental and COVID meeting earlier today, and I can't recall there was an elementary and a secondary number, because I think the public are hearing about this 30% and automatically go to that, and there's lots of questions then about why something's not changing. So I'm just wondering, was it 12% for one and 19 for the other? Or?
That's correct. I did have the opportunity to present today in that meeting, and I appreciate the opportunity, but the baseline for elementary is determined from our September to December 17th data for the elementary panel was 12%, which means that on any given day, there might be 12% of students who are absent in elementary schools across our system during that time period. And in secondary schools, it was established as 19%. So the 30% rule goes over and above the baseline. So should a school receive that baseline plus 30, they contact our COVID lead, our superintendent involved in health and safety, and our health and safety officer all involved, and then there's communication with public health for follow-up back with us. And then we follow their lead, and I do believe that public health contacted one of our schools today.
Last question, supplemental, Chair Clement, please. That
Go
is,
ahead.
so speaking of elementary, the 12% plus 30% would bring it up to 42%. And that includes everything, I understand. That includes snow days. That includes days the buses don't run. That includes a child that has gone to a special event with a parent. That's everything. Is that why that baseline of
The 30% was set by the Ministry of Health. We follow it. It certainly can, when parents report an absence to us, sometimes we get a report of an absence. We may get a reason, we may not. Absences are a little more prevalent these days for a variety of reasons, but it can include a variety. So I think the 30% is set to encompass all of those absences, and what calculations they made to come up with that percentage, I wouldn't speculate, but I will say that we're in full compliance and we're tracking it regularly each day.
Thank you, Director Bourget. I guess that that's a directive from the province, and it does make the data sort of questionable as to what it really means. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Just please know that we're fully compliant and doing our very best. And as the rules may evolve or change, we'll continue to adjust and adapt.
Thank you, Director Bourget. Any other questions? Comments? I just have one. In this crazy dynamic, in this changing dynamic, I truly thank the staff for this revolving door and keeping up with it. I also want to thank the students for taking every precaution seriously. And with all that, we'll get through that. And I also want to thank all the staff that I saw at the board that day who were bagging these rapid tests. That's going above and beyond for our board. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Now we'll go to new business. Revised estimates 2021-2022. I'll call on Superintendent Bazinet.
Thank you, Chair Clement. Good evening, trustees. It is my pleasure to present the 2021-2022 revised estimates. A copy of the report was sent to all trustees earlier today, and this report will be posted on the board's website during the business day tomorrow. The format of the report is similar to prior years. I'm pleased to advise you that we did file these revised estimates with the Ministry of Education through the EFIS application prior to the due date of December 15, 2021. So I'd like to begin by drawing your attention to page 2 of the report, which is the enrollment section. And as stated previously in Director Bourget's report on enrollment, we see that we have enjoyed a significant increase in our enrollment across the various categories that are listed here on this page, namely our regular elementary students, regular secondary students, our high credit secondary students, and our adult day school students as well. So this increase in enrollment will generate additional GSN revenue, as previously stated by the director, and we will see the value of that reflected in the revenue page later in the report. If we move to page 3 of the report, we have listed the priorities and partnership funds, the PPFs, that have been announced since last summer and since the budget was presented to you last June. So you see on page 3 and on page 4 a listing of all the various PPFs. For each of these PPFs, the board does receive a transfer payment agreement. This agreement does describe the project and the intended purpose of the funds. It also lists the eligible and ineligible expenses, and also provides the reporting templates that need to be produced by the board throughout the course of the year. Often it involves an interim report at the beginning, as well as a final report at the end. When we presented the budget in June, the value of the PPFs at that time was 1.2 million. And you see that it is now increased to 2.4 million. If we move to page 5 of the report, there were additional PPFs announced related to COVID-19 funding. And once again, at budget time, the value was 3.9 million. And we see on this page, it is now just over the $4 million mark. So these funds are all over and above the regular GSN funding. And for the partnership and priorities and partnership funding, essentially it's revenue cost neutral, meaning we receive the revenue with an intent to spend the exact amounts in the various categories. Therefore, it does not affect essentially our operating bottom line. The revenues and expenses are offset. So I'd like to draw your attention to page 6 of the report, which is the revenue page. And once again, you see that we have listed the various columns. So the first column reflects the values that were reported as part of our budget. The second column are the changes to the revenues, mostly increases as a result of the enrollment changes. And then the next column is the difference in dollars, and then the next column is the difference in percentage. So when you look at the difference column, you can see quite clearly that in most cases, the majority of the grants have increased, and that's as a result of the enrollment increase that we've elaborated on. Some of the grants operate in opposite direction, and that is primarily the geographic circumstances grant, whereby they are stabilization grants. Therefore, when enrollment increases, you actually have a decrease in those grants. The language grants are affected by the number of students that are taking the various language programs. At the elementary panel, when we speak of French as a second language, French immersion, as well as Indigenous language. So depending on enrollment in those particular programs, it will affect the funding structure. At the secondary panel, it's mainly the credit values of number of students taking credit value in the Indigenous language grants. So when we look towards the middle of the page and we see total allocation, we see a difference of an increase of just over $4 million. Below that, we see the other revenue from the First Nations, which is an increase of almost 500,000, once again due to a slight increase in elementary enrollment from the tuition fees from the First Nation communities. The little lower, the priorities and partnership funding is reflected as a change. Therefore, it's an increase of 2.4 million. And the bottom section of the page shows the different reserve funds or deferred revenues that are brought into revenue to offset spending in the revised estimate. And on the very last column, you see the accumulated surplus. So when the budget was presented to you, we had projected that would be a draw of 1.6 million from the reserve. And at the revised estimates, we also are predicting a 1.6 million draw from the reserve. So this page reflects the changes in revenue as a result of primarily the change in enrollment. If we move to page 7 of the report, this page shows the changes to the expected expenses in the various categories. So certainly the first row, instruction, is our largest area of spending. It's anything related to the education, direct education of our students. So we see that for our revised estimates, our spending is predicted to increase by $2.8 million, which is a 2.3% increase in spending. The breakdown of that 2.8 million, for the most part, there's over $1 million, which is related to additional teaching costs for the elementary panel. Not only do we have more elementary teachers, we also have updated the salary and benefit values for the elementary panel based on the actual teaching staff complement based on an October 31st extract from our payroll personnel system. And we also do that extract for all of our personnel and make any adjustments to salaries and benefits based on that extract. So that has also produced a slight increase in those costs. We also had a very large carry forward for our school budgets, both elementary and secondary, and that also was just over $1 million. In terms of school management, just a slight increase of $43,000, just based on some adjustments, primarily related to changes within the allocations of spending within secondary and elementary panels. Student support services, an increase of $240,000, once again, primarily related to increases in staffing costs, both in terms of noon hour supervisors increases, both at elementary and secondary levels, as well as some increases for our ASW group for their supports for students as well. If we go down the page a little more, we see a category, it's called COVID-19 expenses. We see that there's a $0 value at budget time. We purposely had not put any expenses for COVID-19 in anticipation of some PPF funding from the province, hoping that the funding that would be announced would be sufficient to offset our expected COVID-19 expenses. For our revised budget, we have increased our COVID-19 expenses by $1.1 million, primarily for two reasons. One is the requirement of the continued enhanced cleaning requirement at all our various schools, as well as an anticipated increase in the overall replacement cost due to high absences within the various employee groups for the current fiscal year. The last category to increase is the Priorities and Partnership Fund. Once again, that is increasing the expenses which are offset by the revenues. So that accounts for the expenses as it relates to the revised budget. On the very last page, on page 8 of the report, we show the position of our various reserves. So the very first row is the accumulated surplus, which has a beginning balance of 6.9 million. We anticipate a draw of the 1.6 million as previously stated, which would give us a remaining balance on August 31st of 2022 of almost $5.3 million in that reserve. We have our retirement gratuities and employee future benefit reserves, which will remain at this point unchanged. The Student Focus Initiative, we see that we have $178,593 of withdrawal. Those are related to expenses anticipated in two programs. One is the international program and one is the mental health program. These withdrawals stem back to board motions that date back to 2016 and 2018, whereby the board had allocated a dollar value for both of those programs. And every year, whatever the balance remains, we just move forward. Therefore, we anticipate that the budget that is given for those programs will be spent, which is why you see the withdrawal. For special education, we had September 1st starting balance of 6.1 million. We anticipate of bringing in revenues or a withdrawal of 1.685 million to give us a remaining balance predicted at this time of 4.4 million. Our proceeds of disposition reserve, which is the reserve that is made from the sale of our surplus properties, at this point in time is anticipated to remain at 1.2 million. So that essentially provides a brief statement of all our various reserves in terms of the starting balance, as well as the withdrawals expected in the current fiscal year and our anticipated ending balances. Chair Clement, concludes the report, and I'd be pleased to answer any question from trustees.
Thank you, Superintendent Bezinet. Okay, questions, Trustee Cosmerly.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Clément. Just a question about the special education. There was 800,000 in the deferred revenue that we seem to have lost. Is that related to waiting for SIP funding? Like, are we running into some issues while we wait for that to get an announcement about that funding?
Through you, Chair Clement, thank you. Essentially, what is being shown on page 6 is essentially when we filed the budget in June, we anticipated bringing in 2.4 million from our reserve. However, now we are anticipating bringing in a lower value of 1.6 million, because if you look at the top of the page, you see that our revenues have also increased. So it's not a loss of any funding whatsoever.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Trustee Morrison.
Through you, Chair Clement, to Superintendent Bazinet. Dennis, just I think it was on page 5 or 6 on the revenue side. One of the areas that did show a drop in revenue was Indigenous education. Is that enrollment related?
Yes, thank you. Through you to Chair Clement. Essentially, it's a blend of two factors. One is direct enrollment affects the grant. However, the number of students also taking particular credit courses or the language also will affect the grant. So the net of the two is a slight decrease.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I saw, yes, Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Clement. Through you to Superintendent Bazinet. I was just wondering about an item at the bottom of page 6. You went over the reserve funds, but I didn't hear anything about school renewal. So we budgeted 0 and there's just over 3.8 million. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Thank you. Yes, through you, Chair Clement. Essentially, at budget time, you'll see that the dollar value was 0 because in the middle of the page, we get an in-year funding and it's listed at 3.2 million. So at budget time, we plan to spend strictly the allocation that is announced when the GSNs are released. However, now that we're doing a revised budget, we have a carry forward of unspent dollars from prior years in the category of school renewal. So we now bring them into our revenue stream as we do plan to spend it or a good portion of it in the current fiscal year. So it's just a carry forward from the prior year under the school renewal category.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Bazinet. Any other questions? Did I see any other hands here? No, I did not. Thank you very much, Superintendent Bazinet.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to number 2, and we'll bring Superintendent Bazinet back on property.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Clement. Essentially, this motion is presented to you this evening. You'll recall at the December meeting, we had given the board an update that the capital construction work that is happening at Churchill is anticipated and predicted to be complete by the summer. Therefore, we would be accepting students into Churchill from Cyril Varney. Therefore, this motion is presented to you so that we can begin the disposal process of that surplus property.
Thank you very much. Can we read the motion then? That the property at 1545 Gary Avenue, Sudbury, Ontario, P3A 4G5, Cyril Varney Public School be declared surplus to the needs of Rainbow District School Board as of June 30th, 2022. Moved by someone? trustee Cosmony. Seconded by someone? Trustee Stringer. Thank you. Any questions? Nice. Oh, Trustee Morrison.
Quick question through you. I understand and I'm fully supportive of the need to start the process so we can move things forward here. But just wondering, do we not foresee that there could be any chance that there is summer programming? We used to have reading and literacy support programs, and the Principal Council program was held at Cerro Barney, so we're not foreseeing any need for any summer programming at that location?
Trustee, Superintendent Bazinet.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Clement. Essentially, the date is simply there to indicate that's the last day of the current school year. The actual disposal of the property is anticipated to take 6 to 12 months. Therefore, we will still be in ownership of the property, certainly at a minimum throughout the summer, given that we must follow the regulation for the disposal. And typically it takes the first 6 months to go through the preferred list of agencies who may express interest. And failing any interest from the preferred agencies, then we would proceed to listing on the open market. And once again, it is not anticipated that that would occur till early this fall.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Superintendent Bazinet. Question, Trustee Dewar.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to apologize that I didn't phone you earlier, Superintendent Bazinet, because I should have to ask you about this. So I'm not going to ask a question right now. I'm just going to let you know that I'm a little bit nervous about supporting this motion. Things have happened so quickly. Things change so quickly. I'm not sure I want to see us start in the process to dispose of that property. I guess it's a sign of the times. I also know, however, that if there was for any reason an emergency whereby we felt this type of motion was premature, we do have the ability to have a special meeting and to rescind a motion. And for those reasons, I'm going to be voting in favor of this motion. But I tell you, I guess it's a sign of the times. Things happen so quickly, and all of a sudden, the plans that we have to be changed. So, two things. I apologize for not having called you and spoken to you earlier, and I will be supporting with the clear understanding that we do have the ability as a board to be able to rescind. Thank you very much, Chair Clement.
Thank you, Trustee Dewar. I think I saw another question. Yes, Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Clement. Through you to Superintendent Bazinet. I believe there were other properties that we have declared surplus but kept on using. Maybe Chelmsford Public School is what I'm thinking of. So I'm just wondering, and taking into account what Trustee Dewar said, is there a point where once that process begins, we can't stop it, like the sharing of the information to municipal and other schools, or can we stop that process at any time if we started that and we needed to change our minds?
Through you, Chair Clement. Thank you, Trustee Gibson. Very similar to what Trustee Dewar was mentioning is, and you are correct, we have passed a motion to declare the Chelmsford Public site surplus to the board. We have proceeded and circulated to the preferred agencies, and that was done prior to COVID, of course. And so currently we still remain in control of the process and in control of the ownership. So absolutely, the board remains totally in control, regardless of the fact that we start the circulation process. We have the ability to pause, if you wish, or rescind in the future should the circumstances dictate otherwise.
So supplementary, if I may. So then passing this motion basically just puts the ball, it gives staff the authority to make those decisions rather than coming to us at a later date. You've got the authority then to do it when you wish. If you were to get a good offer, you'd be able to act. And I guess what Trustee Dewar was saying was maybe in that circumstance, she would want you to come to the board. So I'm not sure. I would have thought that's something we hand off to you as an operational issue. And as you see fit, if you didn't think that it was a time to sell because you need it for operational purposes, obviously that's, I guess, what happened with Chelmsford Public School, because we declared it surplus. We were going through the process, but then we needed it to house our remote school. Is that what happened? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. What I'm saying is things change and you would respond to the change, I would imagine, not the board. So that's why I'm just getting a little confused about the responsibility there. I know we have to go through this process to declare it surplus. That's to give you the authority to start that process, I suppose. Sorry, I'm just sort of talking out loud because what Chair Dewar, Trustee Dewar said made me think. But don't we just hand it over to you? Does that not make sense?
For you, Chair Clement, essentially this motion triggers the process only if there were interest on the part of any of the preferred agencies, and then it becomes part of a negotiation on selling price. And that decision to accept or reject a particular offer resides solely with the Board of Trustees and would come back to you for discussion and subsequent approval.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely the process remains in the control of the Board of Trustees as a whole.
Just one more supplementary, if I may, to clarify. But I guess my point is that you don't come back to us till the very end when it's all ready to go and it's just a yes or a no. It's not like we're involved. So that's all I was. You could still do that. That doesn't change if we vote on this today. So that's where I was getting confused. I think Dina has her hand up, Bob. Chair Clement, I'm not sure if you can see her. Thank you.
Trustee Morrison.
Very briefly, and I thank my fellow trustees for their questions. That's clarified some things for me. Bottom line, Dennis, so I'm looking to confirm this with you. This remains in our control. If we have an operational need for this building, and I know we don't make facility decisions without considering operational educational needs of our kids, our educators would be advising you that, and facilities would not be proceeding with going ahead and getting bids on a property that we're going to need to educate students in. I'm also reminded of the condition of that particular building. Without going on about it, we had to spend an awful lot of money because we had the roof of the gym in that building collapse. And we had no other place to put those kids in New Sudbury. So we had to spend an awful lot of money, even though the school is already on our books as a future closure. Just to remind trustees of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Morrison. Trustee Stringer.
Through you, Chair Clement, to Superintendent Bazinet. Is there a timeline on this in terms of making this decision? Is it important at this moment to be proceeding because of some other timeline set, or is this fairly open?
Thank you, through you, Chair Clement, essentially, the reason it's coming before you is the fact that we do anticipate at this time that we will be operating out of Churchill come September, and we've made those modifications for kindergarten registration as well. And the second piece is we would like to, from an operational perspective, increase our proceeds of disposition reserve, which does allow funding to be available to the board for capital projects as well as renewal projects. So when we just reflect back that where we are today is a process that began with a board decision of February of 2017. It's just a continuation of the process, but please bear in mind that the board is in 100% control of the process at any time, and therefore, once again, we are proceeding with a process. However, we can come back to the board with an update in 3-4 months once we've circulated, and if we have interest or no interest from the preferred agencies, we can come back to the board with that update, and just also to check in whether or not we continue with that next phase, which is proceeding to the open market.
Thank you. Supplementary, Trustee Stringer.
Thank you, Superintendent Bazinet. That was very interesting. That gave me a much more understanding. I'm just wondering, when we are moving the students over to Churchill, are our class sizes still going to be the same as they would have been when they were at Varney?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Clement. Essentially, I would request that you maybe pause that question, because at this point, the February 1st Strategic Planning Committee meeting will be dedicated to various updates, much of which will center on the New Sudbury capital projects. Therefore, perhaps we, with your permission, we could revisit that question at that time.
Thank you. That's fine.
Thank you, Superintendent Bazinet. Any more questions? Any comments? I see none. Poll vote, Director Bourget.
Trustee Clement,
In favor.
Trustee Dabowski,
I abstain.
Trustee Dewar,
In favor.
Trustee Gibson,
In favor.
Trustee Hunda,
In favor.
Trustee Cosmerly,
In favor?
Trustee Morrison,
In favor?
Trustee St. Jean, Trustee St. Jean's in favor. Trustee Stringer,
In favor.
Student Trustee Yao,
In favor.
motion's carried.
Thank you, Superintendent Bazinet. Now, under the next move is number 3, Public Education Symposium, PES for short, 2022. We have a motion that the board approve the attendance of the following trustees at the virtual 2022 Public Education Symposium to be held via Zoom on Friday, January 28th, 2022 for a total registration fee of $847.50. Trustees attending: Clement, Trustee Gibson, Trustee Morrison, Trustee Dabowski, Trustee Hunda, Trustee Stringer, Trustee Dewar, Trustee Cosmerly. May I have a mover, please? Trustee Morrison. Seconder, please. Trustee Dewar. I see none. Any question? No. A poll vote, please.
Trustee Clement,
In favor.
Trustee Dabowski,
In favor.
Trustee Dewar,
Sorry. In favor.
Trustee Gibson,
In favor.
Trustee Hunda,
In favor.
Trustee Morrison,
In favor?
Trustee St. Jean. Trustee St. Jean's in favor. Trustee Stringer,
In favor.
Student Trustee Au.
In favor.
Trustee Cosmerly's in favor as well.
Trustee Cosmely, my apologies. Chair Clement, all are in favor, including Trustee Cosmely.
Thank you.
So sorry.
Superintendent Bourget. Number 4, we have a request for leave of absence. I don't think we have any. It's a good night. Everybody's here. Well, number 5, director's remarks. I'll call on Director Bourget.
Thank you, Chair Clement. I'll keep my comments brief, as we've had many reports tonight. But I would like to thank all of our staff for their resilience, their dedication, and their courage. We continue to work together to support our students through the current wave of the pandemic. And the work that occurs each and every day on behalf of students is very significant and highly commendable. As you know, we continue to prioritize safety, mental health, wellness, and belonging, which provide a strong foundation for learning. And I'm grateful to the Board of Trustees for your support and advocacy for our students and staff. In the days and weeks ahead, we will continue to face new challenges. Being kind, caring, and patient goes a very long way in supporting each other. It is a simple yet very powerful way to continue to make a difference each and every day. And with that, I'll close with sharing some appointments. Just as a point of information, in December, Mr. Neil Dubosky was appointed Vice Principal at Manitoulin Secondary School. And in addition, effective February 7th, 2022, Principal Pablo Gilofau, current principal at Levack Public School, will be appointed interim principal of Indigenous Education. Vice Principal Colleen Eberlein will move from Queen Elizabeth Public School to acting principal at Levack Public School. And Laura Pogue, who is working as a consultant with the board, will move to the acting vice principal role at Queen Elizabeth Public School. And these recent appointments are in effect on an interim basis until the end of June, and this will enable us to focus on priorities, and it will enable us to fill temporary vacancies. And that's the end of my report. Thank you, Chair Clement.
Thank you, Director Bourget. We go to number 6, other items. We have the Officer Director, Trustee Cosmerly. Do you have anything to report?
I do. A couple of things. First of all, for Project Compass, the Project Compass Steering Committee met last Friday. I sit on that committee as the Northern Rep. The work of the 4 subcommittees is now completed, though one of the subcommittees has one final meeting. 39 recommendations were generated from the consultations with trustees. A draft implementation plan has been developed and was reviewed and signed off by the committee on Friday. That plan will now go to the OPSPA Executive Council for their review and approval, and specific pieces will be brought to the Board of Directors as required. Implementation of the recommendations will be staggered, with all work to be completed by June 2023. A communique has been prepared by the OPSPA staff and was sent to the regional chairs yesterday for distribution to trustees. I will follow up just to make sure that we all get it. Secondly, just want to remind people about the virtual PES this coming Friday, starting at 8:45 in the morning, and it'll be directly followed by a Northern Directors meeting at 3:30. One of the agenda items for the Northern Directors is a preliminary discussion about the OPSPA priorities to see if they're still relevant. If you have any feedback or any comments you want to make about the current priorities, please forward them to me by noon on Friday. Finally, the next Board of Directors meeting is at the end of February, and that's all for my report.
Thank you very much, Trustee Cosmony. We'll go to number 2. Student Trustee Michael Yao, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, first off, thanks to all of you guys. I met with a few senators yesterday as like a quick check-in, and we were working hard on the Stand Up Speak Out conference, but mostly we were talking about the return of 4 periods come semester 2. And it's nice to hear that we're going back to a little bit of normalcy. And although some of us were a little scared, I think we're all looking forward to going back to a little bit of a normal schedule. And it was crazy to hear. I remember I was talking with one of the senators who was in grade 11, and they were asking whether we have a little bit of time to move in between classes. And then I remembered, oh my gosh, they've never been in a normal semester before. So it's definitely a little bit scary, a little bit daunting, but it's good to hear that hopefully they'll at least get a little bit of a normal semester too. I won't share too much about our plans, as I'm hoping to share that a little bit later on when I can give you some concrete data and a little bit of facts, but we're working towards some really good things for the community. So I'm super, super excited about that. But yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you, Trustee Yao. And I know that, yeah, they're really excited about the 4 classes. Let's see, trustees' remarks. Any remarks? Trustee Stringer.
Thank you, Chair Clement. I'd also like to echo the earlier remarks for recognizing and applauding the efforts of our administrators and all our staff in these ever-changing and extremely challenging times. Our administrators and staff go above and beyond every single day to provide the best possible learning situation for all of our students. And I also want them to know how much we appreciate everything they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else have a comment or question? I see one. Trustee Dewar.
Yes, I just would like to share with everyone that I have 2 words for our students going back to the 4 to 4. Those words are woohoo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure the staff also will be also really excited. Okay, for the next step, my first one, Chairman's remarks. And sorry, you're gonna have to put up with a few remarks here. I'll keep it short. Coming up, what's been going on our board, Bell Let's Talk Day. That'll be Wednesday, January 26th. Rainbow District School Board Mental Health Team has prepared a list of helpful resources. And also, you can go on our website and you can check those out anytime. Parent Resource Guide. A resource guide for parents, guardians is now available online. The guide lists municipal, provincial, and federal agencies and programs that support children and families. To access the guide, go to our board website. The guide was produced by Gene Hansen Public School. It was so well received that Superintendent Wozniak asked that it be shared online for access by all families. Back to in-person learning, it's been wonderful to see students returning to school in person. Educators continue to find interesting ways to engage students, sparking creativity and exciting for learning. Here's a few. S. Geiger used Play-Doh to make models of the watershed. Students from Redwood Acres Public School worked cooperatively to build a snow tunnel and also enjoyed Inside Out and Backwards Day. Grade 2 students from Cyril Varney in Mrs. Marsh's class read a book called I Am that discusses positive affirmation. Students created a handprint craft where they wrote something positive about themselves. The English, Understanding Contemporary First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Voices class at Sudbury Secondary School in participating in a Canada-wide outreach initiative called Feathers for Our Women. The feathers are to show, support, and raise awareness for the missing of murdered women, girls, transgender, and two-spirited people in Canada. And Manitoulin Secondary School shared a Go Green Club has set up an Eco Hero program to encourage and inspire students to become more eco-conscious. The program helps students discover ways they can reduce their ecological footprint by making little changes that together have a big impact. For instance, taking shorter showers, not using plastic, and avoiding single-use wrap. And taking note of the Professional Development Day, a friendly reminder to families, there is a Professional Development Day, February 4th. There will be no school for students on that day. In parent involvement meeting, the next PIC meeting will take place on Tuesday, February the 8th at 7 p.m. The topic will be School Climate Survey Results, Census Survey Consultants. I would like to remind everybody that February is Black History Month. And in keeping with the tradition of having a quote from the chair at the end of the meeting, I'd like to quote this. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that bring daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Martin Luther King. Those are true words. And to see what happened in the hockey world just a couple of days ago, racism is still alive and well. So we have work to do. That's the end for me. Thank you very much. We have information and proposals. Please take time to read the attached minutes, reports from the official staff, from parent involvement committees, special education advisory. Non-staff communications is nil. And here you have your future meetings. Please take note of those. And now we have adjournment. That we now do adjourn. I need a mover. Trustee Dewar and Trustee Honda. Thank you very much. It was a great meeting. Thank you, Carrie. I hope it works out for you soon.